On behalf of Netnology, welcome to another demonstration segment of the Cisco Be Boundless initiative. Cisco is doubling down on integrating cross-domain architectures which address customer business needs. These simple cross-domain integration examples span Cisco SDX and cloud architectures and solutions, while having a laser focus on security, analytics, and automation without technology barriers. In other words, one part of Cisco making another part of Cisco even better. Be Boundless. Netnology is one of the top integrator partners and a Be Boundless champion, working hand in hand with Cisco to make Be Boundless a reality. We will be demonstrating the integration of Cisco ACI on-prem and ACI Anywhere AWS solutions. The demonstration will include some of the configuration and show an example of the integration in a live lab environment. Cisco ACI Anywhere enables consistent policy across on-prem and public cloud instances. ACI Anywhere provides additional automation for application development and IT workflows. ACI Anywhere also extends security features like whitelisting, policy enforcement, analytics, and micro-segmentation to the AWS cloud solution. ACI Anywhere can use existing ACI policy models to push applications to AWS. ACI Anywhere integrates with the Cisco Multi-Site Orchestrator for orchestration and features. The solution is based on open APIs for SDN fabric programmability. For instance, with ACI Anywhere, we can take an on-prem workload or application and fully migrate it to the public cloud using existing policy models in ACI by pushing them with the multi-site orchestrator. The prerequisites to deploy the ACI Anywhere lab are an AWS account with available public IPs and resources for ACI Anywhere deployment, a multi-site orchestrator deployed and integrated with on-prem ACI solution, a CSR 1KV for on-prem integration, and existing ACI policy to model and push to the cloud. This is the topology diagram for the demonstration. There are two on-prem sites integrated with the multi-site orchestrator and an AWS instance integrated with the multi-site orchestrator. For the demo, we will only be using policy from Site 2. There is a CSR 1KV on-prem that forms IPsec and GRE tunnels with the CSRs in the AWS that are used for the inter-site network for ACI Anywhere. The assumptions in this demonstration are there is an existing ACI environment, existing server workloads, an existing AWS account, a CSR 1KV available on-prem, and an existing multi-site orchestrator deployed and integrated with on-prem ACI Fabric. Let's get started with the live demonstration. In the AWS Marketplace, we will search for the Cisco Cloud Application Policy Infrastructure Controller. From here, we continue to the configuration. Next, we leave the default fulfillment option and choose our desired software version and the region we want to deploy it in. Then we can continue to launch. On this screen, we will choose the Launch CloudFormation option in the Choose Action menu. Then, click Launch. This next menu, we can leave all the defaults and click Next. Now, we enter a stack name for the environment and complete the required parameters. Then click Next. In Step 3 for the stack options, we can leave everything here default and click Next. In Step 4, review the configurations, check the acknowledgement at the bottom, and create the stack. Once the stack is done deploying, we launch the instance from the EC2 dashboard. We see its public IP address here to access the instance, which we will now log into. We can log into the Cloud APIC to continue the setup. We will be reviewing the already completed setup here for this demo, but in the first run, you will enter these configurations. Enter in DNS and NTP settings for the environment. Next, enter in the region management settings. Choose Regions, then we can set the autonomous system number. Next, we will enter in our throughput and license information for the CSR1 KVs deployed in AWS. Now we can enter in the public IP for our on-prem environment. We also enter in the OSPF area ID for the connectivity over the tunnels and assign subnets for the on-prem connectivity. This setting is the Cloud TEP pool for all tunnel endpoint IP addresses. This pool cannot overlap on-prem IP ranges. Complete this section of the setup by registering the Smart Licensing. At this point, we are done with the basic Cloud APIC AWS configuration, and we can now see the CAPIC dashboard. Now at this time, the two CSR1 KVs will be deploying and configuring in the AWS cloud. We can go to AWS EC2 Instance Dashboard to see this. Once the CSR1 KVs are done deploying and launching, we can now begin our setup in the multi-site orchestrator. From the multi-site dashboard, we will go to Sites to add the AWS instance. Click Add New Site to add the Cloud APIC AWS instance. Here, we will just review the configuration for our demo instance. Once the AWS site is added, we will begin to configure the infrastructure. To do this, we will click on Configure Infra. Now select the AWS site and enter in a BGP password if you set one up. Click the ACI Multi-Site button to enable the multi-site connectivity. Now we can deploy. There are a few options here. Deploy only would be in the case of cloud-to-cloud multi-site only. Deploy and download would be to push the config to both the on-site and cloud sites. Plus, it will download the configuration needed to set up our on-prem CSR1 KV. This is the option that was used in this demo setup. We will now review what the downloaded IPN device configuration looks like. The downloaded configuration will be in a zip file. There will be two files similar to these shown here for the CSR1 KVs. If we open one of these files, we can see the configuration needed to be applied to our on-prem CSR1 KV. In this lab demo, only one CSR1 KV was used, so the configurations from both files were consolidated so that both tunnels were on the same CSR1 KV. Here is the final configuration of the on-prem CSR1 KV. You can see the IPsec tunnels, OSPF configuration, and other details. Again, note that in this demo, we configured only a single CSR1 KV on-prem, so there are tunnels to both cloud CSR1 KVs. Once this is complete, we can go back to the Cloud APIC and verify that the VPC, IPsec tunnels, and BGP sessions are all up. The environment is now ready to begin configuration from the multi-site orchestrator to deploy our tenants. In the Tenants section, we can see some tenants we have added. Here, we will review our demo setup of the NN tenant. Opening the tenant, we can see the sites associated with it. If we check and uncheck our AWS instance, we can review the additional configuration required to associate a tenant to an AWS instance. We need to associate an AWS account with the site. The first thing we need to input is the AWS account ID. If the tenant is untrusted, you will need to also input the AWS access key and secret access key. In our case, it was trusted, so we only need to input the AWS account ID. Now we can create and deploy schema for the environment. For this demo, we have created the NN test schema. In the NN test schema, we will review the NN AWS template used for our demo. This template was imported from the ACI on-prem Site 2. This tenant was a very basic tenant with one application profile and 2 EPGs with 2 bridge domains. In this demo, we will be looking at the details of just the Web EPG and Web BD. Selecting the Web EPG, we can see the shared common configurations like the contracts, VRF, and bridge domain used. We can review the same for the bridge domain. Now that we have a template, we apply this template to both Site 2 on-prem and the AWS cloud site. First, we can look at Site 2 local configurations. If we look at the Site 2 Web BD configuration, we can see the subnet created for the Web BD and EPG. So far, this configuration is the same as normal ACI multi-site configurations. Next, let's look at the AWS site local configuration. In the AWS site local configuration, we can see the bridge domains are grayed out because we don't create bridge domains in AWS. One thing we do need to input is in the Web EPG for AWS, we see there is a selector site local property. In this section, we want to add something that will allow endpoints to be dropped into the EPG. If we look at the configured endpoint selector website local, we can see we created the expression of IP address equals the address of an EC2 server instance we have in AWS. After confirming these basic configurations, we can now save and deploy to our sites. Let's look at the configuration first from the on-prem APIC. In the NN tenant on-prem, we see that it was created from the multi-site controller. This should all look familiar to any tenant pushed from ACI multi-site to an on-prem site. One piece we can look into here is in L3 outs, we see there is an external EPG created for web. This external EPG is for the AWS instance. If we look at the policy for this external EPG, we can see that a subnet for our EC2 instance in the AWS Web EPG has been added here. Now we can take a look at what has been deployed in the AWS site. Let's look at deploying a server we want to put in the AWS Web EPG from the EC2 instance's dashboard. We will select Launch More Like This from an instance and look at the configurations. From Step 3 of Configure Instance, we can look at the VPC used. We can see it's our context that was pushed from the multi-site controller. This configuration was created site local in the VRF section of the AWS site. Then, we select the subnet we want to use. Here we see the subnet created for web that our 192.168.0.212 server is in and select that. Finally, we need to apply our security settings pushed from the multi-site orchestrator. In Step 6, we can see the security groups, which we know are the EPGs we have created. These security groups will have the contract policies pushed from the multi-site orchestrator. Looking here, we see that we allow all protocols and ports, and there is an entry for the on-prem subnet used. This EC2 server instance can now be deployed and used. We can also look at this policy from the Cloud APIC controller, just like we did from the on-prem APIC. From the Cloud APIC, we can expand application management and select tenants. Here we see the NN tenant that we deployed from the multi-site orchestrator. We can select different sections, like EPGs, and we see the 4 EPGs deployed. Similar to the on-prem configuration, we have 2 that are local to the AWS cloud and 2 that are related to the on-prem deployment. We can look at the VRF created here and see from the Application Management Cloud Context profiles, the NN US East 1 for NN tenant has our CIDR and subnets associated to it. Now, if we go back and open up the endpoints for the NN tenant and look at the cloud resources associated to it, we will see there is one endpoint in the Cloud Web EPG. If we click on the endpoint, we can see the details of that EC2 instance and the 212 address we know is associated with that server. From this security group, we can also see the properties of our website local IP-based selector that is placing this server in the Web EPG. This concludes our basic demonstration of ACI Anywhere. There are a lot of capabilities and features with ACI Anywhere integration. This demonstration only touches the surface, but opens the door as an introduction of how to get started with ACI and AWS. Thank you for watching.